today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about how to get your needs across to her without getting into a big fight. Well, here's the deal. Men, you can speak your truth without starting a war or losing your sense of self. But this is what authentic communication is about. Being courageous is about exposing yourself and taking the chance that you may come out of it bleeding. Being careful is making sure that you don't expose yourself until you know they really want you to. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about speaking without selling out. It's the art of authentic communication, and that word authentic is thrown around a lot. We're going to talk about what does it mean here. So every time you try to be honest, it turns into a fight, or worse, it turns into silence. In fact, sometimes you don't feel like you can be honest because you don't want to have a fight. You either blow up or you just shut down. Or sometimes some of us just say what we think she wants to hear because anything is better than that fight. Anything is better than that emotional intensity, which only makes us want to respond with emotional intensity. Well, here's the deal. Men, you can speak your truth without starting a war or losing your sense of self. And I'm going to talk more about what that means in this episode. It's really important. This is one of my favorite topics because for men in 2025 and moving forward, it is central to success in partnership, central to success in business and in life. Real communication is possible when you stop trying to win and start trying to be real. And I know you're not sitting there thinking, I'm going to win at all costs. We're going to talk more about what that means also. The core problem is that being honest often seems to backfire on us. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had guys come to me and say, I was just being honest, and she got so pissed off at me. In fact, I was just being honest is actually ruined more marriages than outright lies. It's why we slip into not being completely honest. It's why we slip into keeping information to ourselves. It is why we slip into sometimes actually lying and pretending to ourselves that we're being honest because we just don't want it to backfire. We're so invested. Our value of family and marriage is such that we compromise our value of integrity. And I want you to know that's not your fault when that happens, by the way. We were taught that. We are taught that by our parents. And if we weren't taught that by our parents, we learned it watching a program or we learned it from some freaking talking head on a podcast, right? No more talking heads. Done with that. So here's the thing, is that honesty is like any tool. It could be used to cultivate seeds for the future. It could be used to beat your partner into submission. And I know you've experienced that, right? I know you get into an argument and she comes up with all the things you've done wrong for the last 10 years, and you know they're wrong. She's got a little bit of a different spin on it than you do, but you know that there's some truth to it. And you just feel beaten down by that. Well, I'd love to say that's a uniquely woman thing. The only thing that's uniquely woman is that they remember all the things wrong for the last 10 years, but we still use honesty as a weapon. And so we got to be really careful with honesty. And we got to get that there are some forms of honesty that are actually dishonest. And I'm talking, this is what like the authenticity part is about. There is a way that we use emotion that's not honest. Oh, the emotion might be authentic, but it's not honest and authentic. It's not our true core selves. The guys who come to me, they slip into one of three patterns, right? They're over-explaining to their wives. Oh, well, it has to be this way. I did this because of this, this, and this. Well, yeah, but you have to understand that, and that. And they kind of overwhelm their wives with their why. And they totally miss what the problem is because when we over-explain, we get so wrapped up in our why. And then we don't see why they don't understand us. Why don't they freaking understand us? Meanwhile, they're not feeling heard because we've talked over them with our over-explaining. We talked over them with our master plan and where we were going and why we did X and why A, B, and C leads us to X, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We talked over them. The other is avoiding. This is a pretty common strategy right now. Most people who are successfully leading parallel lives are avoiding. They're getting fulfilled when we're leading, and most people I talk about most people like I ain't never done that. Let me tell you, I've done that. Right? When I'm living parallel lives, and you know what? I want to tell you that Rich never leads a parallel life, but right now I'm here on a podcast. My wife is working on the other room. To some extent, that's parallel lives, and it isn't, because we do meet and talk. Parallel lives is where we're fulfilling our personal needs through our individual pursuits, and we're not really having authentic interaction, sharing of feelings. We may be doing things logistically correctly, but emotionally we're kind of avoiding each other. Parallel lives is a form of avoiding, and what we're avoiding is what happens when we actually share our needs and we get not the reaction we want, right? Or there's the third category of guys, which is exploding, right? These are the guys who are sharing their needs. She goes, what? And they go, what? And she goes, what? And it turns into a big fight. The people who are avoiding have had what? And I tell you, I've been there too. They've had that, and they feel like avoiding is safer for the kids, and they're right, than having an explosion. That doesn't mean they're avoiding is the best of the three. All three of these choices, these patterns that we slip into with our wives, our partners, they lead to divorce ultimately, or even worse, years and years of living in misery in marriage. I guess what's worse about that is the studies show that kids who grow up in a marriage where parents are unhappy for one reason, because they've got, let's say, those three patterns, one of those three patterns going on, those kids have the lowest sense of well-being. The kids with the highest sense of well-being live in a household where the two parents are talking authentically, sharing emotion, needs are being met, and they're moving forward and they're in harmony. And then in between that are kids whose parents have gotten divorced. The next highest level of well-being are kids whose parents have gotten divorced, but they share the same values. They have the same schedules at home. They're co-parenting together. They don't really want to live together. They don't want to be besties, but they agree on pretty much everything in regards to kids. Those kids have the second level of well-being. The kids with the third level of well-being are kids who are divorced and parents completely disagree. And like I said, the worst is when they stay married and they completely disagree. And so I'm not telling you if you completely disagree to get divorced. I'm telling you, if you're in one of those three patterns I just talked about, you might want to take a look at it. Now, the first two of these, the over-explaining and the avoiding, they can be part of what's called the nice guy trap. So here's how the nice guy trap works. We're all told that men and women are equal. And they are, just very different. We don't talk about that part, though. Men and women are equal. They should get paid for equal jobs. And I'm not going to get into that stuff, but I am going to say that men and women are very different. And the way we slip into the nice guy trap is we now understand that we're meant to be more caring, empathetic guys. We're not, there's a thing called toxic masculinity, a behavior set that's been identified as toxic masculinity. And this is behavior that is diminutive of women in some way. And nice guys are kind of the opposite of toxic masculinity. It's like, well, I'm not going to be that, so I'm going to be a nice guy. And the nice guy is trying to do what she said asks for. Now, the reason why it's a trap is that, first of all, sometimes we're doing things that she asked for that don't really resonate with us, and we get angry about it. The reason why it's a trap is sometimes people, forget women, sometimes people ask for things that they don't really want. They're like testing by asking to see what you're going to do. And if you give them what they want, then you fail the test. And the other part of the trap is that when we are out of integrity with ourselves and do things that we're asked to do that we don't feel good about, we don't feel good about ourselves. So let's talk about my favorite couple, Brad and Gwen. Brad, whenever there's a problem, a fight about some disagreement about the kids, He always wants to talk things out, his point of view on the kids. You know what, Gwen? It's really important for the kids to go to swimming every week. I used to be a competitive swimmer, and I think competitive swimming is really good for them. And Gwen says, oh, but little Timmy isn't really athletic, and he doesn't even he's afraid of the water. So why should he do it? And Brad says, oh, well, facing your fears is good. It was good for me. It'll be good for Timmy. Let me explain how this works. And Gwen says even louder, but Timmy hates swimming and he's starting to resent you for it. And Brad says, don't worry, Timmy will get over it. I felt the same way when I was a kid. He'll get past it. Swimming is really good. And Brad is constantly justifying his side. And in the end, he doesn't get why she doesn't understand what he's saying. And Gwen feels totally unheard. He doesn't even acknowledge why Timmy might be feeling what he's feeling and why Gwen is concerned about it. And so eventually Gwen just shuts down. Eventually what Gwen's going to do, by the way, is divorce Brad's ass because she feels like she's being gaslit and he's in denial about what's going on. Now, the truth is that Brad has some great principles that he's talking about in his why. I want him to be stronger. I want him to face his fears, etc. There's some great principles here. We talked in the last episode about principles, and we talked also about personalities, but Brad's getting all wrapped up in what worked for him, and he's not recognizing that Timmy might be different than him. And his biggest mistake is he's not hearing her. He thinks that he's being authentic. He thinks he's being true to himself. And in a way, he is being true to himself, but he's not being true to his marital commitment. He's trying to overshare or dominate Gwen through oversharing. And even though it's authentic in the sense that there are principles that he believes in, it's inauthentic in the sense that when he married Gwen, he made a commitment to honor her strengths and hear her point of view. And let me tell you that when it comes to the children, very often women have a take on children that men can't have because of the structure of our brains. It's vital that we listen to them. It would be vital for Brad to really hear what Gwen's talking about. And the punchline might not be that Timmy isn't going to swim. It might be that they're going to talk to him about it, that they're going to ease him into it, that they're going to do it a different way. The punchline could be anything. But the fact is, the way Brad is operating now isn't working. He thinks he's being true to himself. He thinks he's being authentic. He thinks he's being honest. But he's compromising his marital familial principle. Authenticity means clarity. It means maybe even being a little vulnerable. What's happening with Brad and Gwen is that Brad's amping it up. No, Gwen, you don't understand. When I was a kid, this is what worked for me. And my dad did this with me and it worked. The trick is to be courageous, not careful. Careful words protect your ego. Courageous words protect the relationship. Now, you may think that Brad was being courageous, but he wasn't. He was hiding out in his own experience. Being careful would be to speak in a caring way instead of running her over. Being careful would be to expose himself. Here, I'll tell you another Brad and Gwen story. This is a really good one. For years, Brad and Gwen have had date night. And the rule at date night, like any healthy date night, is they don't talk about work. Gwen is very obsessed with work. Brad's not too shy on work himself. So this is a really tough night for them. They find themselves talking about the logistics of their travel plans. Maybe they talk about their kids, logistics. They stick to things that are safe. Well, one day, Brad and Gwen were about to go home from they had finally taken a long vacation together. And Brad had really enjoyed his time with Gwen. He had felt like for the first time, they had really connected in a way that was very important for him, super important for him. And so he said to, this has been amazing. I feel like we connected here in a way. We just, because we had this time together, we spent so much time together, we really deepened our connection. And I'm concerned that when we go home to Louisville, that we'll slip back into workaholism. And he expressed this like in a very careful way. Gwen, being used to Brad over talking, being used to Brad being kind of righteous and oversharing and laying out his point of view and his why, immediately went on the alert. She said, well, Brad, I feel a little criticized right now. I feel like you're saying that at home, I'm not available to you. And Brad paused for a moment. He had just learned this lesson about emotional regulation and authentic communication. He had just learned to speak when he's grounded, not flooded. He started to feel a little flooded because he didn't think he'd been attacking her. And he got a little emotional. And he said, you know what? I don't want to do this right now. She said, what? He said, Brad said, I don't want to do this right now because I feel like I wanted to have a really caring conversation with you and it's gotten a little spiky. And could we just leave this open and talk about it at another time? And Gwen got really concerned then because she doesn't like to go to bed with open issues. And the more she went at him, the more he said, you know, listen, this is getting just more intense. I feel very emotional. I don't feel like I can talk about this right now. This is really different for Brad. And Gwen got really spooked. Finally, Gwen said, listen, I can see that you're upset and you're withdrawing and it's scary for me. I want to at least understand what's going on here. Please. So she chilled out and said, please. And Brad told her, I feel a little hurt. I feel a little sad. And Gwen backed up a little. And then Brad said, hey, I want you to try something. I want you to try a little committed listening. I want you to just tell me, what's the feeling that I said and what's the reason? And she did that. And he said, yes, you got it. That's it. And then she said, well, I feel like you always talk about your feelings, but you never want to hear about mine. And he practiced some committed listening. He said, it sounds like you're a little frustrated because you feel like we always talk about me and not you. She said, yeah. I said, well, all right. So what are you feeling right now? And they had a whole conversation about feelings. And in the end, what Brad and Gwen agreed was that they needed to have more conversations like that when they went back to Louisville. That kind of conversation was what was important. And so instead of walking away with a blueprint for how they were going to have a more intimate and caring relationship, they walked away with a strategy instead of a set of tactics, which was Brad's usual go-to. They walked away with a strategy, which is, hey, let's have conversations that are vulnerable and open with each other, where we share our feelings with one another and just see where it goes. This was really new for them. Now, why did this work? The truth is that Gwen had tried to have conversations with Brad like this in the past, but he had never been open to it. The reason why it worked was Brad took the lead, right? The reason why it worked was Brad decided that he wasn't going to engage in a frustrating or angry discussion with Gwen because he did not want to have that kind of relationship with her. You need to get this. This is really important. Brad recognized that when he got angry or frustrated and engaged in that kind of conversation about, well, you're angry about this, well, I'm angry about that it tore down the relationship, that the conversation that needed to happen to continue the experience they had had on their vacation together was one of, this is what I'm feeling. Can we just talk about feelings? Can we just bare ourselves to take a chance and bare ourselves? And Brad had made a decision that he was not going to take names and kick butt. And Gwen tested it, right? Just notice that her first reaction to that was, wait, what? What do you mean? You're not going to talk about it. I think at one point, Brad said that she told him, I don't appreciate that you're being all victim-y here, right? Like she poked the bear. And when he didn't react, she said, all right, it's safe. I can do this too. I would love to tell you they lived happily ever after. Isn't that the story we like? The truth is, it took time for them to have more and more of this kind of conversation. Sometimes you poke the bear and the bear goes raw, right? And it takes time to work that through. But this is what authentic communication is about. Being courageous is about exposing yourself and taking the chance that you may come out of it bleeding. Being careful is making sure that you don't expose yourself until you know they really want you to. So notice that what Brad did not do is say, I'm trying to talk to you about how we can be closer together and you've hurt my feelings. He didn't. He said, you know what? I can see this is going someplace. This is going to a place I really don't want to go with you. I don't want to be in an angry, spiky, frustrated place with you. That's not what this marriage is about for me. He declared it and he backed it up. You don't want to be reckless, but at the same time, when the opportunity comes, you don't want to shrink away. You can say what's true, even when it's hard, and it'll build trust over time. See, authenticity without blame opens space for her to be honest too. Now, you may think that Brad was being weak, but he wasn't. He was being truly strong. True strength is saying, all right, here I am. Take your best shot. It may hurt, but I can take it. That is true strength. So here's a tool for you, a question to ask yourself before speaking. Anytime that you feel yourself getting a little agitated, like Brad was, the first question is it true? So Brad asked himself, is it true? Was I being critical? I wasn't intending to be, but I could see how she might feel that way or take it that way, given our history together. The next question, is it mine to say? What Brad wanted to say was, you're always critical. You always feel I'm criticizing you. There's never an opening here. You want to say it just like that. But he realized it wasn't his to say because, first of all, he didn't want to talk to her with that emotion. And second of all, it's for her to observe about herself, right? Taking her inventory, that's not something for him to say unless she asks for it. And then the last part is it loving in intent? And so in the end, Brad said, all right, I'm going to tell you what I'm feeling. They're not pretty feelings, but they're my feelings. I feel hurt. I feel sad. Some of it has to do with experiences that have nothing to do with you that this experience is bringing up, but they're my feelings. The fact is, you can't speak clearly if you haven't made peace with what's inside you. And Brad had made peace with what's inside of him. You want to check your motive. Are you trying to fix, control, vent, or are you really trying to connect? Ask yourself, where am I emotionally? Am I reacting, or am I having my feelings, moving through with my feelings so I can be proactive? Am I connected to what matters? Are the principles that I stand for in this marriage truly on the front burner? And am I willing to truly hear her? All right, there's a lot more to this than that, but that's the core of it. And my commitment in this podcast is to keep it to treadmill time. And unless you're going to go for a really long treadmill ride, I don't want to go too much deeper. But here's a mantra for you. All right. The mantra is speak from the center, not from the storm. Right? In every hurricane, there's an I. Focus on soul talk, we're going to call it here, or expressing your true self. Like Brad and Gwen, a lot of their date night conversations had been logistical, but they moved to, all right, hey, how are you feeling about this? And by doing that, they created real moments of connection. You don't need to have big talks with huge tactical lists to make big changes. It's these little intimate moments that are going to make the big shifts in your marriage. All right. With that, I'm going to shut this down because I'm telling you, I could go so deep with this, but guess what? We're going to pick up this thread in the next episode of Rich in Relationship. In the meantime, if you are liking what you're hearing, like this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, show us that you're hearing us, DM me, let me know what you want to talk about. If you're a man, go check out our Facebook group, Men, Masculinity and Marriage. It's a place where men are airing out some of their questions and concerns. It's a group of men who are on a shared mission to better their marriages. And in the meantime, I want you to have an awesome day and a fantastic tomorrow.